don't have to be too cautious about. Recently, 2020 uncovered new dangers connected with diving. Research now exists that questions established safety standards. Much of the threat comes from the bends, a hideous condition that can cripple and kill. And that news alone would be reason to investigate. But add now what Stone Phillips has learned. There are those concerned with promoting scuba diving who may not want that bad news to get out.
Yeah, just go ahead, stand up. Stand up. Sidestep out to the platform. Nice and slow. Right here.
It is a journey to another state of mind. A place of serenity, peacefulness. The experience is euphoric, intoxicating, to some even addicting.
I didn't realize there was that much underneath there, the fish
There
and
was
the coral.
all the life.
It's better under there than it is up here, that's for sure.
But out of this tranquil world, charges are beginning to surface that PADI, the largest, most reputable dive training organization in the world, is deliberately not telling novice divers the extent of the risks involved in diving. And while recreational divers are venturing deeper and deeper, medical experts are discovering more and more reasons for caution.
I don't believe at the present time that most recreational divers have a good idea of the risks that they are taking.
Dr. William Shane is the Senior Dive Medical Officer for the world's largest undersea research facility.
The training agencies are afraid of frightening the beginning recreational diver with terrible stories of what can happen to you when you dive. The equipment manufacturers don't want to see the population of divers decrease.
You're playing statistics as to whether or not you have a diving accident.
Dr. Peter Bennett is director of DAN, the Divers Alert Network at Duke University in North Carolina.
There's about a 1 to 2% chance with present technology of diving that you will become a statistic.
That translates to an ominous number. As many as 1 out of every 50 people physically harmed while diving. The danger approaches from within, from the air every diver must breathe to stay alive underwater. As the diver swims deeper, pressure increases dramatically, and some of the pressurized air he breathes is forced into the fluids of the body, creating bubbles. Then, as the diver starts to surface, the water pressure decreases. And just as the bubbles you see here expand on their journey upward, so do the bubbles within the body. If he has stayed down too long or rises too quickly, these culprit bubbles may be trapped in the blood and body tissues and can lead to decompression sickness, a horribly painful condition which attacks the joints and central nervous system. It's more commonly called the bends.
A full-blown neurological hit, the individual ends up being paralyzed usually from the hips down or from the nipple line down with total loss of bowel and bladder function and no muscle activity.
Ultimately, the concern here is that despite decades of experience with scuba, the effects of diving on the human body are still largely unknown. And in fact, the latest medical research is raising unsettling new questions about the long-term effects of diving and the possibility that some people may actually be predisposed to decompression sickness. Some of the most potentially significant research is going on here at Cambridge University in England.
Could divers be suffering permanent spinal cord damage without even knowing it? New scientific research suggests that could be happening. Pathologist Dr. Ian Calder was conducting a routine autopsy on a British sport diver who died accidentally. Although the diver had once suffered a severe case of the bends, he was believed to have fully recovered.
I found that there was a remarkable amount of damage to his spinal cord, out of context with that which one would have expected from the clinical history, because we thought he had been cured.
This is the cross-section of that diver's spinal cord. The large, pale sections are dead or degenerated tissue. With help from Professor Tony Palmer, further studies found similar damage in 3 professional divers.
We felt that the diving community should know what the dangers are, and if they want to risk themselves, recognizing these dangers, well, that is their business.
Equally significant are the new findings at Duke University. Doctors here say it is now possible to predict which divers are prone to the bends. The reason, a small but detectable hole in the heart, present in as much as 20% of the population.
Hold it now, bear down, record, bear down, real
A
hard,
simple
real
test
harder,
injects
harder,
bubbles
harder,
into the
harder,
blood.
harder. Release and inject, go.
This tape from a previous test shows what happens when the bubbles reach the heart. Watch as the white cloud of bubbles jumps through this opening from one chamber to the other, bypassing the lungs and entering the arteries. If these bubbles were expanding as they would during a dive, damage could be done. This patient had previously suffered a severe case of the bends. Heading the research team is DAN's medical director, Dr. Richard Moon.
And we found that in those divers who have serious neurological abnormalities, that over half of them have this hole in the heart.
To avoid decompression sickness, one of the first things you have to learn as a new diver is how to use one of these, a dive table, to figure out your bottom time, how long you can stay at a given depth, and your surface interval, the amount of time you have to wait between dives.
Now, most divers assume that as long as they follow this guide, they will be safe from the bends. But the disturbing truth is that even while following the tables, divers can still suffer the pain of decompression sickness. It all depends on how you, as an individual diver, respond to underwater pressure. Careful, experienced, and highly trained in diving, Art and 6 of his friends were on a 5-day trip exploring shipwrecks off the coast of North Carolina.
I had air left and bottom time left. We made no mistakes on the dive. We observed all the normal precautions, and it happened.
Within a matter of minutes, Art was experiencing the first stages of the bends.
We have a diver who is showing symptoms of the bend, and we're going to need an airlift.
In this reenactment for 2020, the Pedro, a Marine rescue helicopter, approaches to perform an emergency airlift. Time becomes critical. Delays in treating Art can mean irreversible damage. The only known treatment is to simply recompress the patient in a chamber using compressed air and allow the culprit gases to escape the body in their smaller, pressurized state. It requires many hours of treatment and can cost thousands of dollars. Last year, more than 500 cases of decompression sickness were handled in the country. And Art, like many victims of the bends, says he was not exceeding the limits of the dive tables.
There was no problem. There was no mistakes in the dive.
How deep were you? For how long?
110 feet for 18 minutes total bottom time.
So you left yourself some cushion.
Absolutely.
You thought you were playing it safe.
Right.
Art was treated successfully by Dr. Moon, who says Art's case is not so unusual.
About half of all dive accidents in the United States were people who were following the rules, following the tables, and doing everything, as far as we can tell, that they should have been doing.
Michael Bean claims he is yet another example of the shortcomings of the tables. A recently certified diver, Bean says he was making a controlled ascent off Sarasota, Florida from 120 feet, and that he too was diving well within the limits, with 3 minutes of bottom time to spare.
When I got to the dive ladder, I noticed that my left shoulder had a pretty good sized ache in it, and then it had crept over to my other shoulder. And once I got into the boat, well then it hit, and it hit. I lost all faculties about me. I had no control of anything.
Bean was treated in a decompression chamber over a 5-day period. He was paralyzed from the waist down for several months. Only recently did he regain his ability to walk.
I was convinced through my training that if you did not push the limits, you could expect to have a healthy, enjoyable life diving, which I, at this point in time, don't feel is the case at all.
Michael Bean felt there should have been a warning that even following the tables, there was a chance he could get bent. So he decided to do something about it. He filed a lawsuit against PADI, the Professional Association of Dive Instructors, the organization responsible for his dive training. It was a product liability lawsuit, the first of its kind in the country,
and it charged that the dive tables were an inherently dangerous product and that Patty failed to provide the proper warnings.
The information he had was adequate and was proper, and that suit will be defended very, very vigorously.
Al Hornsby is the vice president of Patty. If that warning had been present in your beginner's manual earlier, at the time that Bean and others were diving, might not be facing this lawsuit.
Do you realize the manual that he used had that warning and told him to dive well within the limits of the U.S. Navy table?
Did it tell him specifically that there was no guarantee that even within the limits that a diver wouldn't be bent?
No. I don't guess it was.
I think if they were a little more honest and explained that they just don't know, they just don't have any solid answers with this subject, I think people would take it upon themselves to be a little bit more cautious.
Since Bean's injury, Patty has come out with a new, more conservative dive table. But Bean's dive was within even the new limits. Bean's attorney and Patty assistant dive instructor, Clyde Wilson.
Those dive tables give you 13 minutes at 120 feet, and he was 12 minutes, 10 seconds. So he would have been within the new table, and yet he was still badly injured.
So they wouldn't have helped him?
They wouldn't have helped him. Besides which, they're still selling the old table as an alternate without recalling it, without getting the word out that this is a dangerous product. You know, don't use the old table anymore. They're selling it as an alternative product.
Wilson and Bean's lawsuit is only one of several criticisms focused on Patty and its dive training operation. Another question is why Patty reserves this warning for only the most advanced divers. It suggests that instead of 1 in 50 divers being hurt, the hit rate is 1 in 20 divers. Why isn't that kind of a warning, that kind of information in the beginner's manual? Shouldn't they have that kind of information? Why only here?
The beginner's manual tells people to dive conservatively and well within the limits of the dive tables. It's stated very clearly.
But it does not point out, has not for years pointed out, that that kind of an incident rate is at least possible. That kind of a warning doesn't exist in the beginner's manual, and the question is why?
In the beginner's manual, we are teaching people what habits to develop, and they are told to dive well within the limits of the tables.
But Wilson and other Patty critics say the reason these warnings are not given to beginning divers is that they have yet to purchase all of this, the hundreds of dollars worth of equipment a diver needs to get started. Although Patty doesn't sell equipment, yet another lawsuit filed by a group of Patty instructors in Texas charges that Patty has moved away from being a pure instructional agency to being an organization more interested in promoting the sale of equipment. And the California State Attorney General's office is investigating further allegations that individual Patty officers and directors may have profited from the mishandling of nonprofit funds. Patty denies all of these charges, but has actively promoted the practice of having dive instructors double as dive shop equipment salesmen.
The strong sell attitude of the association, it has progressively gotten worse in the last 5 or 6 years. Even to having the other organizations ridicule us at various resorts and dive spots. Here come the Patty salesmen instead of the Patty instructors.
John Slade was once one of Patty's top instructors, a recipient of several Patty Awards for excellence, before he left to join a competing dive training organization.
Both myself and many other people feel that it's strictly to sell a product, to sell a book or a table, and to increase diver interest, to bring more divers in. Let's don't scare them. Let's bring them in. Let's get them certified. Let's get them out there diving and buying equipment.
It's an opinion he has. He may have it. We differ in that opinion. And I would say that he was very much in the minority of instructors within this organization.
This is your publication, a Patty publication here, the Undersea Journal. There's an article in here that says, it's titled here, "Not Selling is Not Teaching," or "Why Sales Training is a Must for Every Diving Educator."
Sure.
What's this about?
I believe what you'll find that it is about that the sharing of ideas, the communicating of ideas, the sharing of excitement is in itself selling. It's selling of what one knows to someone else.
But this article's talking about the selling of equipment.
It talks about that as well as the selling of ideas.
Only recently have doctors begun to talk openly about the risks and the new medical research. not to scare divers, but to inform them.
This is not a time to be cavalier in our approach to diving, because there is this information beginning to appear, enough of it around to make one suspicious. At that point, it may be time to step back a moment and say, perhaps we ought to be a little careful about our diving for fear of doing permanent damage to ourselves.
We come as visitors to this alluring underwater world with an incomplete picture of our own vulnerability. And until we unravel the mysteries of diving, Michael Bean and others like him will follow their training, dive within the tables, and still suffer the bends.
There's a lot of us out there walking the way I walk that haven't pushed it. I think the biggest message to be had here is that there is a lot of doubt surrounding this, and that you take your life in your hands when you go down there.
Yeah, I think we should point out, so everybody doesn't get scared away from a good sport, that 30 years ago, when I was teaching diving, it was a lot less safe than it is now.
Well, that may be so, and certainly the equipment has become much more sophisticated. But Hugh, today this is being sold as a sport for the everyman, and doctors say we really don't know much more today about the bends than we did 30 years ago. So it's a good idea to have a physical examination before you go diving. And if this evidence continues to support the research about this hole in the heart, suggesting that some divers may be more prone to the bends, that may be a test that people want to have as well.
Yeah, I would say get an examination and don't go to the limits. Build in your own margins away from any limits people say are safe.
It's a good rule for everybody.
Great. Thank you, Stu. Well, later, taking the winter blues seriously, John Stossel reports that this box can change your life dramatically if you're desperate.